With less than a week to go until the game week 1 deadline, it's time for me to reveal my latest FPL draft because, shock, lots of changes have been made to the team, so I can't wait to show you exactly which players are locked into this team and which ones are still up for debate. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure to drop a like, aim for 300 on this video. If you haven't already, make sure you do hit that subscribe button, it's always massively appreciated. Enough waffling. Let's get to today's video. So kicking things off with the goalkeepers, and I've actually taken some money out of the goalkeepers here, and we got a combination of Kelleher at 4.5 million and Dubravka at 4 million. Now, previously, if you watched the videos, you'll note that I had Robert Sanchez at 5 million. I've taken 0.5 million out to invest it elsewhere in the team. The problem right now with Sanchez and Chelsea is that ACL injury to Levi Colwill. I'm just trying to understand and process whether that is really going to negatively affect Chelsea or whether the replacements that we have available to us, for example, Chalobah and Tosin as a 2 at the back, maybe Hato comes in at left side of centre-back, probably less confident about that. Regardless, Colwill has been such an important player in this Chelsea team, not only from a defensive perspective, but also from a leadership perspective. And the way we build up from play, that left foot is so key in those areas. So I do think in all, Chelsea are going to be negatively affected by this Colwill injury. And I would put him up there alongside Palmer and that in terms of the importance that he has on this Chelsea team. So that's just put a little bit of pause on the selection of Sanchez. So we're going to go for Kelleher. Now, I don't love the pick, but I also don't love spending loads of money on a goalkeeper. So I like the fixtures enough to justify going Kelleher. I think there's a good opportunity for save points along the way. And we got to hope that Brentford's new manager, maybe because we have lost Vissa and Mbeumo, goes to a bit more of a default status where it's about just making them really, really tight and maybe winning games by a goal to nil or two. We might see a bit of an evolved Brentford team this year. And of course, the most essential player in everybody's team is going to be Dubravka. I just don't really see the point now in going for two 4.5 million goalkeepers and rotating them each and every week when we got somebody who is going to be the number one at Burnley. Now, I get it. It's a promoted team in Burnley, but still had a decent record in the Championship. Yes, I do not expect them to transition over the same in the Premier League. They've lost Trafford and the Premier League is a completely different beast, but at 4 million, if you can get someone like Dubravka who also helps you enable an early bench boost in game week 1 or game week 2, I think you just get it done. So even though I'm not completely locked in on Kelleher, I feel more confident on this combination of goalkeepers. So moving into the defenders, and I am finding myself as we get closer to the game week 1 deadline, putting more and more money in these 5 players. And I think because of course the introduction of the defensive contributions, we're starting to wrap our heads a bit more around it. And I think the more we think about it, the better these defenders are becoming each and every day. And a quick reminder, with the defensive contributions, defenders need to get 10 actions. And that's going to include things like clearances, blocks, interceptions, and tackles. The things that you really need to know about is tackles and clearances. That's how the defenders are really going to get close to that 10 benchmark, and then they get their 2 additional points. So we are trying to target those types of players, but also not just completely avoid those players that are offensive fullbacks that legitimately have way more chance of getting double-digit hauls with goals, for example. So we're trying to get a bit of a balance here. So we have got Crystal Palace's Richards at 4.5 million, Van Dijk is 6 million, Steve at 4 million of Burnley, Pedro Porro at 5.5 million, and Murillo at 5.5 million of Nottingham Forest. So previously I had a bit of a structure of 6 million, 5.5, 2 4.5s, and then the cheap option of 4 million in the Steve because it's a bit of a gem there if you especially don't really want to have 5 playing defenders. So first up, the 6 million picks. Now, I'm going to put the defensive contributions of last season on your screen because we have a bit of a debate in the 6 million. We've got the boring options, which is Van Dijk, Saliba, Gabriel, Vardiel. And then we've got the exciting picks, Cucurella, Kirkes, Aït-Nouri and Frimpong. Frimpong not on the list because, of course, he wasn't in the Premier League last year. So realistically for me, I'm all over these defensive contributions this year. And looking at Virgil van Dijk's total per 90 being 8.11, I'm not as excited as other managers because that doesn't get him to the threshold. There will be some games where he gets 5. There'll be other games where he might get 12 or 13. Hence, this is the average per 90 minutes. But based on this, I do feel like Van Dijk will hit the defensive contributions at times. And with the fixtures that Liverpool do have, the opening game week at home to Bournemouth, I think could be a little bit of a banana skin, but I also just feel like Liverpool could rock up and just win 3-0 in that game. Then they have Newcastle, where they might not even have a forward if Alexander Isak does join Liverpool. It might be someone like Visser or Jackson, who is a huge downgrade from Isak. And then Arsenal at home. If that was away, I would perceive it a little bit differently. But at home, still fancy Liverpool to put up a fantastic performance. And then the games after that become Burnley, Everton, Palace. So I think the fixtures are good enough to invest in Liverpool. And when I look at the other options, I don't feel confident in Arsenal right now because the fixtures are much, much tougher. And Gabriel hasn't really been playing any minutes during pre-season. The Man City defence, I'm still a little bit dubious about. I want to see them get back to their ways of picking up clean sheets before even touching them. And Cucurella, with the Levi Colwill ACL injury and the introduction of Hato, I think Cucurella plays a lot of minutes. But also, is he going to be as offensive as what we first had last season? Anyone that watched the Bayer Leverkusen game, he was in incredible positions. But I don't know if I feel as confident to invest in Cucurella at 6 million when I could just pick up Sanchez at 5 between the sticks. So with all that said, I think Van Dijk is my standout 6 million and I will go there. Now, Pedro Porro has become really, really big for me because the ACL injury to Maddison, hopefully he does recover from that in time for the World Cup and give himself a chance. But it does benefit Pedro Porro, somebody who now probably does take more set pieces because of that situation. And what we saw in pre-season is he has hit the defensive contributions in one of the games. So I think it's a well-rounded option for that game week 1 and game week 3. He does look like a fantastic pick if you can get up to it. And with Murillo, Forest have been pretty damn poor during pre-season, but they're not necessarily conceding tons of goals. I'm expecting a bit of a transitional period for Forest, but with their ownership in general going to be so high, I do like Murillo because he's a monster for bonus points and defensive contributions. So I feel like he's a safe bet in that Forest team. But if I was to free up 0.5 million, I know that I can drop that down to Neco Williams because I do think he is a good option. But I think Murillo is just the standout right now if you can afford it. Now, the Crystal Palace defence is one that is tempting me. Game week 1, not ideal, but the fixtures afterwards are not too bad. And it's actually a team that has impressed me during pre-season, and we know exactly what we are getting with Crystal Palace, whereas other teams like Spurs, we are taking a bit of a shot in the dark whether they are going to be good or not. Now, of course, I would rank them as Munoz 1, Lacroix 2, and then Richards 3 alongside Gahey. But I do think Richards, with the defensive contributions of last season, isn't too bad at all. And if I need a 4.5, I think he rotates well with the team. So I've currently got him in, but I would prefer Lacroix. And then Steve's in as the 4 million. So as you can see, money being invested in the defence, but I do think we have to understand how important their defensive contributions are this season, and it means that we can actually have a bit more consistency with some of our returns this year. Moving into my game week 1 midfielders. Now, Mo Salah and Cole Palmer have been in every single draft that I have built. I look at Erling Haaland's ownership and actually do love the opportunity of going there as a bit of a differential, but I just think it's a scary prospect not having Mo Salah because in game week 1 he gives you such an easy captaincy pick with that home game against Bournemouth with no Huijsen and Zabanyi now gone to PSG and Kirkes playing for Liverpool. So I think Bournemouth have been pretty poor during pre-season. I don't think they've fully found their rhythm yet. With a Liverpool team that's going to have so much hype about them at home, that is a scary prospect to go without Mo Salah. And he also gives you a captaincy option in game week 4 with their game away against Burnley. So with all that said, yes, game week 2 against Newcastle and game week 3 against Arsenal, but I do just think it's a brave manager to go without Mo Salah. And I think the same is going to apply for Cole Palmer. Now, what we saw in the Club World Cup was fantastic. And I do think naturally that has played a part on why his ownership is so high. Because last season, remember, I'm a Chelsea fan, so I was a bit more happy about Palmer in the second half of the season, just knowing he's playing well, just not getting returns. You guys were slagging him off. So it's got to be the Club World Cup why managers are actually going for him. And I still think he's a great pick. Now, of course, this Chelsea team is in a little bit of flux. Basically got rid of all of the front three and have brought in 2 forwards in João Pedro and Delap. Left-hand side, we got Gittins and potentially Xavi Simons and Garnacho. And the right-hand side is going to have Pedro Neto and, of course, Estevao. Palmer most likely to play in the 10 or on the right-hand side where we need to bolster the midfield at times. So I think there will be a little bit of inconsistency with the positionings that Palmer picks up. But we know, guaranteed minutes. on penalties, and he's still the big dog in this team. So I just think you go with Cole Palmer, brilliant price point, and if he doesn't actually get the goal share that he had in previous seasons, we then move that money to a Saka if we want to, or downgrade it to some of the cheaper options and change the team structure. Now, this is the big one here. Bruno Fernandes has stayed in my team for the last 5 days. And that's actually quite a big thing, because when you are building drafts and looking at them, players come in and out. But he's still staying in my team. Now, basically, that position is either going to be Bruno Fernandes or it's going to be Florian Wirtz. I don't really find another way of me getting both of them into this midfield unless I take money significantly out of the front line. So I do think Bruno Fernandes is just one of those players that I think ticks all of the boxes. Now, remember, talisman in this Man United team, on penalties, guaranteed minutes. And we also now have, and I'm sorry to bore you about this, but the introduction of defensive contributions. Now, let me put up the numbers of him last season. And you can see here, the total defensive contributions per 90 was 11.04. So he hit those numbers sometimes, obviously sometimes fell short of the 12. Remember, it's 12 for midfielders that they do need to hit. So Bruno Fernandes will continue to tick over with these defensive contributions. He was 4th best of midfielders for expected goal involvement in a Man United team that he was laying on a plate for some terrible finishes, to say the least. So in a Man United team that were in complete flux last season, he's now surrounded by Cunha, he's surrounded by Mbeumo, Sesko to be the number 9, and just a much better understanding of the system. I do believe Bruno Fernandes is just becoming an incredible option at 9 million. Now, of course, with Florian Wirtz, it's a scary prospect not going without him. But I'm just trying to break down those opening 3 game weeks, because for Liverpool, the opening game at home against Bournemouth, would I be surprised if Florian Wirtz, based on what I've seen in the pre-season, just completely lights up the game? I wouldn't at all. But then Newcastle away, followed by Arsenal at home. Even though I think Newcastle are a bit of a bad spot right now, I don't look at those 2 fixtures and think, oh my God, I need Florian Wirtz in those games. And when I look at Bruno Fernandes, yes, the opening game is at home against Arsenal, a team that Man United have had their number at times. But then after that, Fulham away, and then Burnley at home in game week 3. The same game week in that Liverpool play up against Arsenal. So when we're looking for a captaincy option in game week 3, Cole Palmer at home against Fulham, which is absolutely a consideration. But for those managers that have Bruno Fernandes, while others are going for Cole Palmer, because obviously they have Florian Wirtz as well, we could go for the captaincy on Bruno Fernandes and maybe hit a monster haul, which would kind of pay off any sort of returns Wirtz might get in that opening game week. The problem is, of course, the Liverpool fixtures afterwards are quite nice. Burnley, Everton, Palace, Chelsea, Man United. Bruno's, on the other hand, from game week 4 onwards, is City, Chelsea, Brentford, Sunderland. So even though they jump into City in game week 4, they still have Sunderland in game week 7, which is a fantastic captaincy option once again, where there are other tough games. Chelsea play a difficult game away against Aston Villa, and Liverpool go away against Chelsea. So game week 3 and game week 7 are incredible captaincy options for Bruno Fernandes. And if his ownership does remain much lower than that of Florian Wirtz, I think he is worth that money at 9 million. And that is why he's currently in my team. But who knows what we'll see in that Community Shield. If Florian Wirtz lights it up, that could change. Now, in terms of the other positions, because those 3 feel much more locked than what they were 5 days ago, Anderson at 5.5 million for me is the standout. Again, I'm so sorry I'm boring you, but defensive contributions, he is a monster for that. So I think he is just going to be the most consistent at that price point, and great fixtures for Forest. And then Dye at 6.5. Now, this is the one that I really am not sure about. This could be anything. This could go up to a 7.5 and somebody like a Gakpo potentially if I'm able to squeeze him in. But that would require me taking some money out of the team. I think Ndye's good, but if he doesn't get penalties, his numbers aren't fantastic. So we are kind of leaning towards the penalties and Everton's good fixtures. But for right now, he's a great placeholder, but that is one that definitely could change. So finally, taking a look at the forwards. And again, there's been some big changes for me in one particular position. So one that is stuck around is going to be Ollie Watkins. Now, the injury to Morgan Rogers is not ideal. However, it sounds like he's touch and go for game week 1. And then after that, hopefully he will be available. But that does slightly dampen my hope on Ollie Watkins as a pick, because you're taking out someone like Morgan Rogers, who is so integral to the way that it progressed the ball. I am slightly concerned whether that is just going to impact Villa from a real negative perspective. But right now, Watkins is in. I think the fixtures are great. He's been fantastic in pre-season. And Villa have actually been good in pre-season, considering there's a little bit of, negativity towards the team in terms of not really investing their money completely. So Villa's fixtures, Newcastle, Brentford, Palace, Everton, Sunderland, Fulham, Burnley, are pretty much as good as you can get. So right now, I see no reason not to put Ollie Watkins in. I think the only way that I wouldn't have Ollie Watkins in this team is, for example, if I wanted to free up 2 million to get Ndiaye to someone like a Florian Wirtz, then I'd have to take that out of Ollie Watkins and invest that into a cheaper forward. That is a possibility, but again, I like the price point of 9 million. That allows me to pivot to some of the other options in the game. And I think it's even more important right now because, as you can see, I don't have a 7.5 million forward in my team. Now, I'm going to put the list of 7.5 million forwards on the screen here. Remember, Jarrod Bowen is 8 million, but I just can't get behind the Jarrod Bowen pick myself. I'm just not fully sold on that. So we've got Kai Havertz 7.5, not an option, hasn't played pre-season. Visser, we have no idea where he's going to end up. There's no chance we're taking a risk at him. João Pedro, right now, the most owned forward, and I get it. I do think he will be Chelsea's #1 forward, but do I also think Delap will come on and take minutes away from him? Absolutely. So I think João Pedro is fantastic. I do think he is going to be the main man in that forward role, but I also think there is rotation with Delap. Mateta, I love him. I do think he's going under the radar, but again, do I feel completely sold on Mateta? Not really. Chris Wood, I just don't love what's going on right now with Forest in pre-season. I don't feel like they're going to be the same side in the way that they attack and be so reliant on Chris Wood. I might be wrong on that one. Cue the hat-trick in game week 1, but I don't have that great vibe about Forest enough for me to pay 7.5 million for their forward. Dominic Solanke is the big one because this would fix a lot of teams right now. Dominic Solanke in. It means that we got a piece of those Spurs fixtures which are so good in game week 1 and game week 3. But again, hasn't played pre-season and they play the Super Cup a few days before game week 1, which yes is great for a bit of intel to understand whether Spurs are actually good or not, but also not good preparation with a game 3 days later. What's that going to do for them? So then at 7 million, we've got Evan Nielsen, which again, I'm not completely sold on Bournemouth. So that's why I've dropped down to the 6.5 and hence why I've got Ollie Watkins at 9. Because if Gyökeres hits the ground running, easy pivot from Watkins to Gyökeres. If, for example, Isak becomes irresistible at Liverpool, then I could free 1.5 million up, maybe with a double transfer and upgrade him to someone like an Isak. But also, if João Pedro just becomes R9 all of a sudden, then an easy downgrade from Watkins to the 7.5 million bracket. And in terms of the 6.5s, I think there's some interesting options available to us, but Strand Larsen is the one that is standing out for me right now. Sorry, I was just taking a look at the list. I think with Wolves, a little bit difficult to understand how they're going to be without both Aït-Nouri and Cunha, two real big creators in that team. But I see no reason why Strand Larsen isn't going to be the main man in this Wolves team. Now, yes, he did massively overperform last season. He got 18 goal and assists, and he only had an expected goal involvement of 11.31. So I don't think we'll be seeing these numbers once again of Strand Larsen this year, but I think he's proven that he can do the job, and Wolves at times went without Cunha and still managed to pick up results. So I think the fixtures are good enough for Wolves. So Strand Larsen is in, and we've gone for Mark Gui as the 4.5 bench fodder, but one that if he does become the main man at Sunderland, all of a sudden looks an incredible choice. So that's how the team's looking right now. As you can see, I've taken money out of the forward line and I've put it into the defence. Now, when I look at this right now, where am I a little bit hesitant about? Well, the players that I think are locked in is going to be Murillo and Van Dijk in the defence, and probably a Steve, Bruno Fernandes, Palmer and Salah, and then probably none of the front three right now, maybe Mark Gui. However, I do think there is a world where I could take the money out of Ollie Watkins if I want to and invest it somewhere else. But all in all, I think this has a really good balance to the team going into game week 1. And let me just show you how this team would rotate over the opening game weeks before we wrap up this video. So just to show you guys how this team might rotate over the opening 5 or 6 game weeks, I know some people like to plan it up until game week 13. You're not going to get this on this channel because we play the game long enough. We know so much happens. All it will take is a Bruno Fernandes injury and plans are completely out of the window. So I really don't think you should stress too much about what is going to happen past those opening game weeks. I just think unpredictability happens. Transfers happens. Injuries happen. So don't stress too much about it. Just try and plan out for the first opening few game weeks, and then you can run from that. So game week 1 team kind of picks itself. You'd have a bench of Dubravka, Richards, Esteve, and of course Mark Gui. No chance of a bench boost in game week 1. Just to say, we're completely ruling that out. I just don't see how it is viable. But I think the starting 11 is actually not too bad. And whisper it quietly, but Bruno Fernandes at home against Arsenal, would I be surprised if a slight upset there? I wouldn't. I'm just going to put it out there. I could clip this, of course. Now, coming into game week 2, just to give an example of what the team would look like. So, Keller at home against Villa, perfectly fine. Virgil van Dijk away against Newcastle, not ideal, but a great opportunity to hit those defensive contributions. Murillo away against Palace, again, not incredible, but there for the defensive contributions. And Esteve at home against Sunderland. Midfield 5 kind of picks itself a little bit. And then Watkins away against Brentford and Strand Larsen away against Bournemouth. Now, what I will say is this. If we do get an understanding that Mark Gui comes straight into that Sunderland team, and we've had one game week to understand that, Dubravka is a starter at home against Sunderland, Richards at home against Forest, who maybe are starting slow and not scoring goals, and then Pedro Porro away against Man City. That is the little bit worrying one, but if he's on all set pieces and City are still looking a bit ropey defensively, then who knows in that game. I'm not ruling out a bench boost in game week 2. Now, yes, could I maybe change a few players for game week 1 to allow myself in game week 2 to look a little bit better? 100%. There are better fixtures out there for game week 2, but I'm trying to be really flexible with my bench boost. I don't rate the bench boost as highly as others. I think it's very hard to hit huge returns if you're using it in a single game week. So I'm not ruling out a game week 2 bench boost. I think it's definitely a viable option. But let's say this is the team without it. Then we come into game week 3. Again, I think the team looks perfectly fine. The bench, is the bench for a reason. But a front 2 of at home against Palace and at home against Everton is good. And then, of course, we have the differential option of a captaincy on Bruno Fernandes, which I really, really do like. Then coming into game week 4, again, I don't want to look too far in advance. But again, team looks good. Virgil van Dijk away against Burnley. Richards at home against Sunderland. And Porro away against West Ham. What I do like about this is that if we get to game week 4, okay, and Florian Wirtz has just been unbelievable. He's been incredible in game week 1. He's torn Newcastle apart and they beat Arsenal in game week 3. Then, even though when we look at the fixtures of Bruno Fernandes here, and we'll just take a look, he'll have City, Chelsea, Brentford, Sunderland, which is kind of why we want to hold out, and then Liverpool followed by Brighton. I think if you go Bruno, you kind of just need to hold him long term because that's really where the value is in him. Like he could just consistently get returns. But if you're sat there and you're like, I'm scared, Florian Wirtz has just been on another level, Kevin De Bruyne-esque. Then what's great about going Bruno is that you can just simply downgrade Bruno to Florian Wirtz or a Gakpo if all of a sudden that happens. And then you have Wirtz in your team from game week 4. I don't feel that bothered about avoiding Wirtz in the opening 3 game weeks. I think the damage can only really be done in game week 1. Famous last words. And also what I do like about it is that if you go Wirtz in the opening weeks and Bruno Fernandes just becomes incredibly hard, that's 2 transfers because you've got to upgrade it rather than downgrade it. So that is why I'm happy to start with Bruno. Now, I'm not going to look past game week 4 because anything can happen, but that's how the team's looking in these opening weeks. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, so that's going to wrap up today's video looking at my game week 1 latest draft. As you can see, some changes have been made, but there's definitely some players that aren't being locked in. Now, as I discussed, we're going to be doing a lot of deep dive videos, doing previews and of course pre-season game analysis to see which players are standing out. So if you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. There's no better time. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider hitting that like button. Any questions, pop them in the comment section. I'll be sure to get to them. Have an amazing day and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.